Merci beaucoup. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the organizers for inviting me. I apologize to you that I have la grippe, and so my voice is not very good, but I hope you can all hear me. Today, I'm going to try to give you some of my views, which are not scientific. I really am stunned by the detail of the scientific presentations this morning, and like your minister said, I need to try to understand in 2 words all those slides. So I'm not going to be scientific. We have too many scientific brains in the room. I'm going to talk about policies. And policies not for the 21st century. It's not a typing error. It's for the 22nd century. Because what is the ambition that we have today? And that is to be around and survive in 100 years' time. So I'm going to talk to you about what sustainability means, what I think, where we are in terms of climate change and fossil fuels, what the role of the biogas industry can be, and what do we need to do? What do we need if the minister wakes up tomorrow morning? What does he need to do to actually make sure that Morocco gets into the 22nd century? I remind you all that we all agreed to these policies. We all agreed to the Sustainable Development Goals in 2015. All these 17 goals are something that every country in the world signed up to. And those include goals around natural capital, around climate change, around water quality, around protecting our air, gender equality. And Morocco has signed up to those policies as well. So when you as scientists, but you as citizens, wherever you are in the world, talk to your politicians, you should please remind them of this, because this is an obligation which they have taken on, and which I feel sometimes they forget about. This is sustainability according to our governments. This is sustainability according to the United Nations. This is sustainability according to me. It's very simple. It's about generating natural capital. It's about regeneration and protection of human and animal well-being. It's about giving tomorrow's populations, to our children and our grandchildren, the possibility of enjoying the earth that we have enjoyed, and maybe better than we have enjoyed. But it's also about human rights and science and progress and health and education. It's also about having a panel which next time I come here is not just 7 men, but sometimes we can also invite women to sit on the panel in front of us. Sustainability is also sometimes a word which is used by the major corporations for greenwashing. Now, Unilever, you've heard of Unilever. Unilever has a sustainability program, a sustainability living plan, but Unilever also produces 73 billion single soap pouches, which are sold generally in third world countries, totally non-recyclable, totally not recycled, totally ending up in the ocean. But they call that the Sustainable Living Plan. Now, this is not just to criticize Unilever, this is to make you aware that when you see these claims of sustainability, please be skeptical. Please don't take them for what they are. When you see ExxonMobil says we're investigating fuel from algae, you must realize that ExxonMobil is putting in 0.5% of its total income into research into renewable energies. That's all. Be skeptical. We have learned in the United Kingdom that when we talk about recycling, we thought that our plastic waste was being recycled. Actually, we found out that about half of it is being dumped in Indonesia, Malaysia, and other countries around the world, including Mozambique. So again, be careful about what you say, and be careful about the context in which it's said. And this is important because a lot of our major industries still do not take sustainability seriously. They have still not bought in to the arguments which all you people know, you know it better than I do, that we are facing a cataclysmic challenge through climate change and pollution. And they pay lip service, they talk about it, but they haven't really bought into it. And if we look just at the petrochemical industry, the spending on climate change negation, fighting against climate change policies around the world, is huge. These are just the first big 5 companies. They spend $200 million a year fighting climate change, okay? So So these are the sort of forces that we're up against. These are the forces that go and see the minister every day and say, minister, you know, the transition, it's a long transition, it's a slow transition. They always send in very nice people to say this message because they want the minister to be convinced that they are convinced. But these are very, very strong forces. And as a result of these strong forces, we have global energy subsidies to the fossil fuel industry, coal, oil, and some gas, which are in excess of $5 trillion a year, about 6% of global GDP. And of course, the cost of fossil fuel energies is very high. It means that many of the things you do with your renewable energy cannot compete. Somebody said this morning, well, how is it possible for solar energy to compete, or how is it possible for electric vehicles to compete? But how can you compete against an industry which we are subsidizing with $5 trillion? It's sort of quite difficult. And these subsidies are, according to the International Monetary Fund, the largest negative externalities ever estimated. And of course, every country is guilty. My own country, the United Kingdom, gives some $14 billion of subsidies to the coal, gas, and not much to the coal anymore, but to the oil and gas industries. The United States, 25 billion, etc. So it's a difficult scenario we're working in, and it's a scenario which has come to us from a mindset of 20 and 30 years ago, which we are still not over. And you could see that in the last COP process in Katowice in Poland last year. The next COP 26 or 25 is in Madrid in next week, and I will be there. And you can see that the United Nations process is very, very easy to slow down because the whole process requires unanimous votes. If one country stands up and says no, the whole process stops. And so, of course, the US withdrawal has been very disruptive. It's strengthened the logic of people like the Saudis, the Brazilians, that climate change is not really a threat, etc. And of course, it's withdrawn a lot of money from the process. But the need, my friends, the need for action is greater and greater every day. Now, you've all seen this graph from last year, you all know it, but we are heading on a trajectory which is already plus 2 degrees in the next 20 years. And on the trajectory that we are heading on, we are plus 4 to 5 degrees by the end of this century. Now, I don't know what any of you really understand what that means, but it means that 2/3 of the world will be completely uninhabitable and unhospitable to human life. And the climate change gap, which the United Nations Environment Programme just again illustrated yesterday, shows what is happening on the ground. And China is a leader in renewable energy, but China has also announced that 300 new coal-fired power stations will be built in the next 5 years. The Financial Times has estimated that in 2050, 85% of all our energy needs will still be fossil fuels. Australia, after the election, just voted to open the biggest open cast coal mine in the world in Queensland. And as somebody said this morning, CO2 in the atmosphere has gone past 410 parts per million, up from 310 just 50 years ago, and the highest, I think, in 50 million years. We all suffered record temperatures last summer. We're all aware of the burning going on in all the forests all over the world, not just Amazonia, and of the floods going on as a result of deforestation. And as a result of this, cities run out of water, populations migrate, and we have the hundreds of thousands of tragedies across the Mediterranean, across the world, of people running away from climate change. It's really a very, very gloomy picture. But I won't leave you pessimistic, I will leave you optimistic. So be patient. In this, there is a great point of optimism here in Morocco. Morocco is one of only 2 countries in the world to have the policies on the table to reach the 1.5 degree centigrade target of 2100. All the rest is talk. Morocco has actually walked. And congratulations to the government here for getting their act together. There's more they can do, they're aware of it, but meanwhile they're the only country with the Gambia who are on track for 2100. And the other good news is that the subsidies, the direct global subsidies, not the tax breaks, but the direct global subsidies for renewables are increasing. The curve above is the subsidies to fossil fuels. As you can see, it's beginning to fall at last. The graph below are the subsidies to renewable energies. So you can see they are beginning to rise. So it's not all bad news, and we should not despair. We should not be pessimistic. We should fight, because we know that this climate change problem is beatable. What is some of the good news? Well, accelerating growth in technology. All you guys are scientists, and ladies and gentlemen are scientists, so you've all seen the wonderful things being shown to us this morning, which I don't pretend to understand. What it does mean is that the time between discovery and implementation is shortening and shortening and shortening all the time. That's really good news. Until 2017, the other bit of good news shows that actually, I didn't know this, but the forest cover of the world today is higher than the forest cover was 40 years ago. When I saw this, I thought, well, can't be true. But the NASA satellite photos show that. And that's because of massive replanting. I'll talk about that in a moment, going on in many, many countries. Of course, the last 2 years we've seen the situation deteriorate. But up until 2 years ago, we were in a positive situation in terms of reforestation. And tree planting is going on across the world. There is a theory that climate change scientists put around that if we were to color all those yellow boxes in with trees, that would actually offset all the climate change emissions which we have put into the atmosphere over the last 50 years. And actually, it's not so much. The good news is that people are planting trees on a big scale. Ethiopia, in August, planted 350 million trees in one day. The Green Sahara Wall, which you will know about, going from the west to the east of the south of the Sahara, is already working, being planted. And China, India, Pakistan, they're all planting billions and billions of trees, partly to stop flooding, but also as climate change mitigation. And as you all know, the investments to renewables are actually faster and greater in terms of the amount of money going into them than investments from fossil fuels. People are divesting from the fossil fuel industry. The fossil fuel industry, I was talking with people from Shell just 2 days ago, they say at the board level, they're panicking. They know that the game has finished. They are just trying to squeeze and squeeze and squeeze the game as long as they possibly can, but they know that the future is here and not digging petrol out of the ground. This is the future. Theirs is the history. The registration of patents is also a very, very good positive signal, because as the scientists and researchers will know here, when you have less patents being registered, it means you've done everything. And so for renewable energy technologies, that peak we had in roughly about 2010 has gone into a steady decline over the last few years, because the companies have registered so many of those patents that they need to protect their intellectual property on technologies. Of course, there is so much more to do as well. But generally speaking, we are in a situation where the technologies are there, they're registered, and they are mature. And we see this in the growth of renewable energies around developing countries. We can see here how China and India, and suddenly we see that yellow graph, how developing countries are actually overtaking developed countries in terms of renewable power capacity being added year by year. So there's some really, really good news. And I'll come to my little industry, the biogas industry. And the biogas industry treats biodegradable, biogenic waste and makes methane gas out of it. And China has invested over the last few years, you can see here, in biogas in a really, really big way. On the blue, if you like, the blue graph on the right are the industrial size plants, and the yellow or the green graph is the small scale local biogas digesters, which are installed at a farm level or a family or a community level. And China has really a lot of these, around 15 billion cubic meters equivalent of biogas produced per year. And these biogas units are very easy to install, and Professor Al-Bari here, who's an expert on that here in Morocco, will be able to talk about that more later. So the world is already running on biogas in part. It's already a technology which is consolidated and being used, but there's so much more that we can do. In Europe, from 2023, we will have total coverage of all citizens collecting separately their food waste. Now, their food waste in Europe, 28 countries, is around about 100 million tons. We currently collect around about 20 to 30 million tons, and we are going to collect the other 60 to 70 million tons from 2024 onwards. Now, what a fantastic opportunity that is for the biogas industry, because someone's got to treat that food waste. It's all very well collecting it, you've got to do something with it. So you make gas, you make compost, you make digestate. And we estimated at the moment that we are only tapping in to some 2% of the global food waste, which is being recycled back to soil or recycled back to energy. So there's a huge potential to do more. You can read on our website how cities around Europe are, around the world and in Europe, are managing their food waste. This is a really good guide also for countries which have yet to affront this. It's complex, it's difficult, but it's absolutely necessary. And you can see here in this other report, these are free. You can go down to the website and download them. It talks about the potential of the biogas industry. And we estimate today, we have just published a declaration for the climate change meeting next week, that we can actually reduce greenhouse gases by 12% across the globe and meet the equivalent of about a third of all the gas used today, all the coal used today. And there's another way of expressing it, where the various areas of the world will be producing biogas in the next 5 years or so. Europe is the biggest chunk still, but other areas are growing very, very quickly too. And some of the benefits of biogas are that we take a lot of the food waste, the sewage and the agricultural residues, palm oil effluent in the Far East, crops and agro-industrial waste. Think of the dairy industry, think of your abattoirs, and take those loads off of the environment, putting them into biogas units and making energy from them. And of course, you're not just getting energy, you're not just getting gas, but you're also getting the nutrients, the nitrogen, and the CO2, which you can use, and of course the heat. You can use the gas to heat, not just to produce electricity. Biogas plays an important role because it is a contributor to 9 of those 17 Sustainable Development Goals that we saw at the beginning, and gives the possibility of being small scale and large scale. And if you read our website and you read our reports, I'm sure you will see a lot more. So what do we need to do now? And imagine that I'm talking to you and I've got 2 minutes with you, the minister. I'd say, right, we need to eliminate those subsidies very, very fast and get those subsidies from coal and oil into renewable industries. And you will see that wherever you go, we are still giving tax dollar money to the coal, gas and oil industry. You need to incentivize and promote renewable energy. Well, no need to tell you that here in Morocco, you're already doing it. But I can assure you, in some countries around the world, they still haven't understood this. Above all, collect and treat biodegradable wastes. Food waste, if it was a country on its own, would be the 3rd biggest emitter of greenhouse gases after China and the United States. So if we can collect those biodegradable wastes and create energy from them rather than create emissions from them, we're doing the world a big favor. We've got to promote the use of getting some of those renewable soil improvers, digestate and compost back to soil. If we can lock organic carbon back to soil, again, that's a climate change mitigation action that we can do, easy to do, and review our national energy plans. I was with the minister in Spain in April, and they didn't even have biogas in their national energy plan. But they have 30 million pigs. And those pigs have slurry. And what do they do with the slurry? They don't know. It's a big, big environmental problem for them. Well, you can treat that pig slurry, you can treat cow manure, you can treat chicken litter, and you can make energy from it. And we need massive tree planting everywhere. We need to plant trees. It's just so important that we use trees as a carbon sink, and we need to do that on a huge, huge scale. And some countries have declared a climate emergency, ladies and gentlemen. Well, I believe we should all declare a climate emergency. We should act on climate change as if this was war, because we are being attacked and our ways of lives, our way of lives are under threat. I thank you very much for listening to me.